Okay, it looks like everybody's coming back.
Yeah, it's never perfect transitioning from the breakout rooms back to the main room. So I'm sure some of you had some great comments that you didn't get to share, and I apologize for that. And hopefully we'll have a chance now that we're back together to learn from what we were able to talk about in the smaller groups, and then also have a chance to get some of your questions out posed to the larger group.
So who wants to start? Is there somebody from the group 1 who wants to share some highlights?
Yeah, I think I was assigned. So as always, when you get a group of 6 fundraisers together, we found lots of rabbit holes to go down. But in terms of the questions we asked, pretty much the consensus is be conservative on revenue as you're projecting out. There was one kind of national survey that was specific to performing arts organizations, talking about individual annual fund being down about 25%, institutional giving being down about 30%, and the hope that major individual gifts could remain flat because you're going to have some people who are really able to step up and look into that. For those who have events that are a big portion of their revenue streams, AKA probably all of us, that would be something that is still really unknown territory. But I know initially, anecdotally, I've seen a lot of groups have success. I think the question that we're wrestling with as we do our fall gala is how much of the success right now is the novelty and the immediacy of the need. And, we did our Minnesota Book Awards program 2 weeks after the stay-at-home order went into place, did it online, and we doubled our goal for the fundraising portion of it. I'm not counting on that for our fall gala, that same ratio. So, that is, I think, really the hardest, and one of the things that I'm wrestling with right now is trying to budget out our fall gala. And I don't think there were definitive answers in our particular room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I joined group 1 for just a few part of the time, and I think Carrie, you also brought out an interesting point, which was that your programs are reinventing everything that they're doing too, and it's hard to establish your fundraising goal that will support the programs that are looking completely different from before COVID. So that, I think, is a challenge that many of us can probably relate to, is having to work with everything, changed and looking different than it did before.
I think Michael brought up a really good point too. Michael, I don't know if you want to speak for yourself, but you have years of experience in 2008 and saying the tendency is to move away from your donors and leave them alone right now, but that's not a good idea, and that it wasn't a good idea in 2008, really after a session, that you need to stay close to your donors right now.
I think a lot of organizations learned the hard way in 2008 by laying low and just not bothering people, but they lost a lot of donors in the process. So I'm encouraging people I've talked to be engaged and talk to your people. Even if they can't give right now, to keep them informed of the progress you're making and the needs that you have, and the way they can help you. It's important to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Thanks.
for the first time, people actually want to talk to us. They're home, they're answering the phone, and they're thrilled to have a voice on the other end of the line.
That's
Definitely.
true.
Yeah. Greg, someone had asked if you could cite the study which you referred. If you could just do that in the chat, if you know the name, or follow up with Tina and the rest of us, that would be great. And then let's turn it over to the next breakout room 2, if we have somebody who's willing to kind of share what highlights from their discussion.
Was there a group 2?
Yeah, there was. We didn't get around to designating somebody, so I will just share some notes.
Thank you.
Let me encourage my colleagues from room 2 to jump in. But we saw, we all agreed that we'd been having some good success at the present time. And the question is, how long will that last? And can we bank on that, going forward? We thought that the fourth quarter of this year is really going to be a key indication point of how the overall economy is responding and reacting to the, to the huge changes that have been going on. And we thought that there could be some variation by sector of the economy, the arts versus human services versus other things. That said, our group, some organizations are looking at growing their budget and their contributed revenue over the next year. Others, myself, representing an arts organization, we have green, yellow, and red budget lanes and are projecting up to a 10% decrease, as well as a decrease in multi-year pledges at this time. We also talked about many of the same things that were mentioned in room number 1, I think, about retooling and connecting with donors over the phone right now and moving away from live gatherings. But also flexibility in communication with our boards and quarterly, check-ins on how the money is looking and adaptations as necessary. So others from the group?
I would just add that something I flagged I thought was such a smart comment from someone in our room, talking about shifting the framework from an event-driven framework to a relationship and community-driven. We can do the virtual events, but it's a different experience, and just, maybe there are positive things to come out of a shift like that for our organizations as we try to work through this.
I agree, Laura. I think you really hit the nail on the head, and I think it was Nancy who said that. But I really want to just chime in on some things that Michael said. I mean, some of us who've been around the block a few times and seen the 87, 2001, 2008, and now this. I mean, the key, Michael's just hit it right on the head, which is staying close. And as I think Donnie in our group said, not being tone deaf about asking, for people who can't give or just aren't in a space, but really paying attention to those relationships and being in communication and in some ways, even just somebody talked about, how folks are willing to pick up or answer the phone. I mean, honestly, sometimes I think just having that voice-to-voice communication with somebody is so important, just for taking care of that donor, right? And reassuring them that your work is happening and that they're important to you. And so I just think that the key on these crazy times is just to pay attention to the people. I think I'm probably an optimist. I've been in this business for too long, but I think it's going to work out.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to make sure we have a chance for all the groups to share. So let's go ahead and thanks group 2, and let's move to room 3.
This is Kristen. We had a group of about five or six, and what in my notes, again, we didn't designate before, but I have the notes, so I'll go. Part of our conversation was on, again, some of that shifting from events. A lot of it was really trusting in the donor, giving them the opportunity to both be informed and understand what our situation is and what our challenges are, and to have some confidence that for those who can, they will continue to do that and respond. We talked a little bit about some of the messaging, and I work at a human service organization that and our messaging has just always really been around who we serve, you know, our client and our resident. And through conversation with some board members and some other people, what we did for our last appeal was to really change some of the messaging to really focus on our staff and their dedication to come in and work and to continue to provide key services to the more than 200 people we have on our campus living in our facilities. And that isn't the way I usually do it, but that was a message that really resonated for people. And so again, I think somebody was saying to be responsive and to listen and understand what information our donors want to have. We have a couple of new staff and we're building our communications and things. And what we know is, and I know from my own personal experience, we're not all on social media. I'm not all about reading my email right now. And so the calls can be a way of reaching people that we're not gonna, there's no other way to get them because they're just, they're tuned out in a lot of other ways. And the phone calls, I think too, is people are home and they need that personal contact. And whereas before I feel like I got a lot more voicemail, I have a lot more people answering the phone and having longer conversations. And so it really is a good opportunity. And so our group, I think the other thing, Merit talked about grants, and nobody else had talked about that, but our sense right now is that sort of the first emergency response grants are really focused on where they're going. And for those of us who don't necessarily see ourselves as the front lines of COVID, we've sort of felt some of that. We're missing out on some of that, but have the sense that some other foundations are giving at greater levels for Gen Op. I've experienced some shifting and saying, you know, look, if you just need Gen Op, just ask for that. And having a little bit more success with family foundations. And again, I think that goes back to what everybody's talked about, which is relationships. Anything else from the group? And
I think you captured it all, Kristen. Thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
Great, thanks. Room 3, room 4.
We didn't pick a leader, which is awful because I was the person who told everybody to do that. So I'll just start and then somebody else can jump in and save me at some point. But we talked a lot about, again, setting budgets for next year. We have a couple of organizations who shared, and at the zoo shared especially, that they're actually looking to increase their goals over this year, at least from, you know, a fundraising standpoint, but not necessarily from a budget or revenue standpoint. And so that's something that we talked about. And then also pivoting some of these virtual events and figuring out, again, too, I think, who was it that said, Greg, who said, you know, is this just an interesting kind of situation, and what will it look like in a year if we're still, or in 6 months if we're still doing virtual events? And what will the return be? I am curious if, like, by a show of hands, how many people have had a virtual event since we've been home? And how many have another one planned for this summer or fall? Yeah.
Are you doing virtual, like raise your hand button, Anna, or just like visual hand?
Oh, well, Frank raised some sort of fancy hand over there. I don't, I would either, I guess. I was literally raising my hand.
Okay, I didn't have it on the right view to see the hands raised, but.
I was just curious, and I think, you know, that'll be a conversation that we continue to have, the return on those events and what those look like. We also just talked a lot, like all the other groups, about trust and relationships, and not only building those relationships with our donors, but also our team, and giving people the space and the grace to kind of handle this time as they need to, and knowing that we're all in kind of different situations. So that was another thing we talked about. And then probably the last thing that we had a little conversation about was shifting the communications and marketing framework, and how that can be challenging when sometimes their plan has already been put in place, or they have things out to direct marketing, and so working with marketing and communications to realign your messaging for this time. Anything else, group 4, that I missed? Okay. Seeing none, I think that was all of the groups. If anybody has any questions for anybody else or wants to continue to talk about any of these topics, you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat.
Cheryl has her hand raised. Was that for because you're planning to do a virtual event, or is that
Yeah, that's for a virtual event, which
Okay.
actually will be a conference. So there is a registration fee. So we're going to be making some money that way, but not like a virtual gala, I guess I would say. So it's more educational than it is an event, a fundraising event. I can lower my hand now. There we go.
Thank you.
So I am seeing a question from Kristen. Kristen, do you just want to, I mean, you typed it, but you can also explain what you're asking and
Sure.
frame it up for
Yeah,
us.
so I had a really positive experience with our board participating in the Give at Home and then recent appeal. And it's inspired me. And I just wondered if other people had other experiences of finding board members who are more engaged and more interested, and are there other ways besides giving and leading through that people have found during this time, maybe different than usual, in response to our board members who care deeply about what we do and their eagerness to be helpful and in addition to sort of fulfilling their difficult jobs at this time.
Great question. Yeah, and Frank's kind of added something very similar. How are people redirecting their volunteers to keep them engaged through this time? And, whether that be volunteer board members or other volunteers. I think that's an important question.
I'll answer that. Our board has been amazing during these last 2 months. And I mean, we have 48 members of our board of directors. So it's hard to keep them engaged on a good day. But they have been so involved, so engaged. I mean, we're actually getting 100% participation in our committee meetings because we know that they're sitting at home, And I think our finance committee has met 4 times in the last 2 months. And it's just, as Michael was saying, keep them close, keep them in communication, don't try and varnish it. I mean, don't catastrophize it in what you're sending out to them, but don't try and varnish it of, oh, everything's fine. Let them know what you're dealing with and where things are at and what the struggles are. And they have been all over responding. I mean, I loved our board before and I didn't think they could get any better. And they've proven me completely, totally and utterly wrong because they have just really stepped up and are there and helping out. And it's just asking them and being upfront and honest.
I'm on the board for One Village Partners that does development work in Sierra Leone. And they've taken a lot of their volunteers who work on their spring event and their fall events and asked them to become tutors for children of Sierra Leone families who live here in the Twin Cities. So they're doing virtual tutoring to help the kids finish the school year. So it's been a real redirection of the volunteer activity, but it's keeping people really engaged and I think in a very inspiring way.
Yeah, oops, go ahead.
Well, that's great to hear. Yeah, I know. Well, Sarah, you're on the call and you're at the Literacy Council or Literacy Minnesota, which does a great job with volunteers. Do you have any comments on that? It's a big.
Yeah, thank you, Tricia. I mean, it's still evolving. We work with a lot of adult learners who now have had to switch from in-person classes to remote learning. And that's where the bulk of our volunteer, woman and manpower is. And a lot of our volunteers are retired and not, the most agile at computers, but they've really stepped up, and there's been a lot of one-on-one tutoring. We just did, part of our online gala was to raise funds to get technology in the hands of adult learners. So doing what they did in the live classroom to virtual, people have been amazingly flexible about that. And then also, using volunteers to deliver these tablets and iPads to our students. So as programs change, putting our volunteers on it, and they've been great. And we've seen an amazing uptick in our online volunteer trainings and education programs. People are maybe hungry for some meaningful engagement and knowledge at this time. And a lot of great donations when attending our free trainings, FYI. So
Thank you.
That's really cool. Jennifer, I saw you nodding. Are any of the other organizations here offering volunteer options for potentially even new volunteers outside of your board members who are already really committed to your organization? But are you even ramping up your volunteering during this time? And if so, what does that look like?
Well, I have a client that's been doing a lot of work advocating at the Capitol, which has been interesting in this period of time. But they've done a lot of these kind of virtual conversations, and the volunteer ideas and work around advocacy in this space has been very inspiring, and probably about 3 times as many participants in advocacy work as what I saw them do 2 years ago. So it's impressive. And I think like several people have said, people are really hungry to do something meaningful right now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks for sharing. Looks like we have just a few more minutes. Does anybody else have a question for the group or something they'd like to share? Otherwise, we can give you back 3 minutes in your day. I'm trying to practice the pausing for silence. It's especially hard on Zoom calls, I feel like, but seeing none, I think.
Actually, if I can do one quick question, just a show of hands, because in our group, we were talking that we all felt that next year was going to be a harder year than this year. And somebody mentioned that they were actually going the opposite and they were raising goals this year. So just as a show of hands, either virtual or this way, who thinks that next year their overall fundraising goals will be lower than what they've got this year? And who would say that their goals next year they're expecting to be higher than this year's? Who has no crystal ball and no clue? That would be all of us, right? Okay, thank you, thanks.
I just wanted to mention, for me though, I fundraise through workplace giving. So we're projecting lower due to so many furloughed or laid off employees.
Right.
So I don't think we'll see that in the public sector, but the private sector we will for sure, and definitely in nonprofits, because we hold campaigns across all 3 sectors. So that's my reasoning for that.
And I'll just add to that. I think maybe it was you, Greg, that said it before, but just the idea of the events that are doing pretty well right now as we pivot and do virtual. I just feel like if we're still in this space next year, I don't think they're going to go as well. And so I think we're riding on a tide of goodwill that people are going to get really tired of the virtual events and the lack of real connection and engagement that happen at them. It's just kind of a whole different game.
But you have a cute puppy and not all of us can say that, so.
At about 4:30, he's like, workday's done, which is super not true, but this is when he starts to bug me.
Well, great. I think we're right at time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and for the commentary and the insights and sharing. Again, we just wanted to get together as a community and try to figure this out, I guess, together. Nobody has any answers, but maybe together collectively we at least have a better sense of what the future will hold for our organizations. So feel free to send us any feedback that you might have. I think Trisha's going to toss our emails up onto the screen. We're looking to do more of these convenings through the membership committee and want to do better. And so, you know, we're still learning how to do all this too. So feel free to send us some feedback, and thanks everybody for your time.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. We are planning to do another one of these sessions that's on virtual events. So hopefully some of you have questions about that and you'll be able to join. The date that we're looking at for that is June 2nd, and the same time, the 3:30 to 4:30, if you want to pop it on your calendar, and we'll also be sending that out. And I just want to second what Anna shared. This has been a really nice time to connect with a bunch of really, really smart people who are doing great work, and I really appreciate your time this afternoon.